morning, everyone. We're going to give just a few more moments for everyone to log in. I still see people joining. It looks like everyone's on. Good morning. I am Nicole Alley. I'm the Director of Education with the MPI Greater Orlando chapter. Thank you for joining us this morning for our first virtual coffee talk. We have some really exciting content this morning. Some of you have seen it already and are excited to see it again. It is going to be a little different, so you'll get some new content as well. Today, Lauren's going to be sharing the science of stress and how to cope, which is a great topic for right now. She is going to be using the chat and Q&A throughout, so don't be shy. This session is being recorded, just so everyone's made aware. We also have a few upcoming events that we'd love for you to join. These events are also free, which is exciting. So on May 5th at 10 a.m., Lauren's going to be back, and the topic is getting to know your stress personality. And then our MPI Florida Connect series, every week, different Florida chapters doing an education topic. So the topic, it's actually tomorrow, and the topic is industry certifications. I'm sorry, it's April 30th, not tomorrow. It's industry certifications at 10:30 a.m. So if you're interested in registering for either of those sessions, just go to mpiorlando.org and you can get registered and all the information. So just a little bit about Lauren. She holds a doctoral degree in education and curriculum development, strength and conditioning, and performance nutrition. Lauren has been in the health and performance industry for nearly 15 years and has designed and delivered training programs for a lot of really big companies. She's really inspirational, a really wonderful, smart woman, so I'm really excited to hear from her. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to her, and I hope everyone enjoys.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you. It's so good to see you again, for those of you that I met in February. For those who I haven't met, it's a pleasure to virtually meet you. And I hope that you find this educational and relevant. I think that we can all relate to the copious amounts of stress and anxiety we're feeling right now. I know that your industry has taken a big hit. Our industry has as well. And with that comes a lot of stress and anxiety and uncertainty. And so I've been reaching out to friends and colleagues, and Mark was one of them, and Nicole and David. And I just said, what can I do to help, and how can I support? Because I think we need to be there for each other. And so we thought we might revisit this topic. But it is going to be a lot different than it was. There's going to be some refresher, but there's going to be a lot of different conversation going on today. One thing I want to make sure that I do not forget to say, because it's going to be really relevant to today's conversation. I kind of want it swimming in the back of your head, and then it's going to be especially relevant to the conversation we have on May 5th. And that is this. There's a big difference between feeling stressed and feeling anxious, and it going to the next level and turning into burnout or something worse than that, some sort of mental health crisis. We're going to be focusing, of course, on the stress and anxiety that's kind of the day-to-day right now, but I do want to point out something very interesting in the research when you look at stress and anxiety, and that is this. There's a predominant factor that helps, in a bad way, stress and anxiety move from a day-to-day thing that you can manage to something you can't manage, which is burnout or worse. And that distinguishing factor is the feeling of being out of control of your circumstances. And if that doesn't define this COVID crisis, I don't know what does. We all feel very out of control of our circumstances. And so I want to caution you to continuously remind yourself that there is a lot that is in your control right now, even though it feels very out of control. When stress becomes cumulative and unmanageable, and you start to feel like you don't have control over your life and circumstances, that's when things can get a little bit more serious. So I just want you to know that you do have a great degree of control over a couple of things: how we respond to this stress and anxiety, and how we manage our self-care. And so I hope that you're holding on to that. And I think the fact that you're on this webinar right now kind of is evidence that you are managing it and trying to manage it. So I just want to throw that out there before we even begin, because it's going to be very relevant for both of the conversations we have in this webinar and the next one. Okay. So I'm going to talk a lot, and then I'm going to open it up to a lot of conversation, just so you know how this is going to go. I'm going to do some science of stress, and then I'm going to get into something new that we haven't talked about before. And then we're going to kind of open it up for all of us to have a kind of real and raw conversation. So feel like this is, hopefully you feel this is a safe environment to share a little bit about how you've been feeling lately. So here's the refresher. You see on your screen that brain. Just as a refresher, this is your brain broken into three kind of basic parts. If you can see down on the bottom there, this reptilian brain right here, this is your fight or flight brain. Remember that? This is that really primitive part of the brain whose sole purpose is to scan the world for threat. That's all it's built for. That's all it is. It's called a reptilian brain because that is the only part of a brain a reptile has. It's constantly looking around, trying to decide if we are in trouble or not. And then you have this midbrain, and this is called your limbic brain, or emotional brain. And this is obviously where emotions live and also where memory lives. These two, the limbic and reptilian, work together to elicit a stress response, which we're going to get to in a second here. But just know that, let's say somebody cuts you off on the highway, this reptilian brain is going to activate instantly, and almost immediately with it, the emotional brain or limbic brain is going to react as well. And that's where kind of that fight or flight feeling comes from. Maybe you get angry, maybe you flick the guy off, maybe you get fearful and scared. Just know that these two work together, and this limbic brain is where kind of emotions and long-term memory live. And then you've got this new part of the brain called the neocortex or rational brain. Some people call it the new brain. From an evolutionary perspective, this is the newest part of the brain. It's what separates us from other mammals. This is where I call this your high performance hub. This is where logic, reason, rationale, conscious decision-making, critical thinking, intellect, creativity, innovation, all of that focus, all of that lives in your neocortex, your new brain. This is where obviously we want to be, but as I told you before in February, you might be surprised to find out that we live in this bottom part of the brain, reptilian brain, about 95% of our day. And the reason is we're built for survival. So let's dive into how that relates to stress, right? When we have a stressful event, I'm going to use somebody cutting you off on the highway because we've used it before and it's easy to remember. When somebody cuts you off on the highway, and we've all been there, your stress response kicks in, okay? It's really important to understand and know that this is a biological reaction that is out of your control. It's primitive. It's innate. It's built in you. You won't get rid of it. You don't want to get rid of it. So it's very normal to have a stress response to something like a car cutting you off on the highway. When that happens, you have something called the sympathetic nervous system that activates. That's your fight or flight in that reptilian brain. When that happens, a surge of adrenaline and cortisol, it floods the system, and 30% of the blood flow in your brain, as we've talked about before, pools to the bottom part of your brain toward that reptilian brain to react to the situation and keep you alive. that's instantaneous. Now it's pulling away that blood from the high performance hub. And so when you are in a stress response, you have an impaired cognitive new brain. So any kind of cognitive function, it's just going to go out the window. That's going to be your logic, your reason, your rationale, your ability to stop and think through and weigh your options. Also things like your ability to focus and concentrate, your ability to be creative and innovative and come up with new solutions. All of that's going to go by the wayside and be impaired when you're in this sympathetic nervous system response, okay? Other things start to happen too. Non-essential functions like your digestive system and your immune function, those are also going to be impaired. That's why people who are chronic stressors have chronic bowel issues, or they get sick really often. So in a day where we're thinking a lot about immune function, very closely tied to your ability to effectively manage this stress response, right? So the car cuts you off, you get angry, or you get fearful. And then once that threat passes, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. I know some of you have heard this before, but bear with me, because those who haven't, it's really important context to set for us to get to the next thing that I wanted to cover today, which is the primary thing I want to cover today. So parasympathetic nervous system, it kicks in, it activates. It's also known as your rest and digest. So the car drives off, you take a deep breath, and a hormone called acetylcholine is secreted, which is designed to calm the heart rate, and it brings you back to this homeostasis, this place of kind of peace again. Then the blood recruits back to the new brain, and you're able to think through things again. Here's the problem. A threat is a threat is a threat. And your body really can't distinguish between a car pulling out in front of you, which is a real life-threatening issue, and losing a bunch of clients all at once because of this COVID crisis. And although that is a very real, it feels like a very real threat, it's not literally life-threatening, right? But your body's going to react the same way. And when we are in and by the way, it's okay to react that way. Let me reiterate. The problem becomes when we're constantly in this reactive sympathetic nervous system space, when everything is a threat and everything is reactive, and we don't allow ourselves or train ourselves to move into this parasympathetic space, this rest and digest. That's when stress can become cumulative and eventually become unmanageable. And so we want to make sure that we are carving that time out in our day to activate that parasympathetic nervous system. Now, remember, we have no control over whether or not we react to a stressor. That's going to happen. Every time that I think about all of the many flights that were canceled for me personally between, March and September, sympathetic nervous system is going to activate. I'm going to get flushed. Blood pressure is going to go up. I'm going to get upset. The trick is, how fast can you move yourself from that reactive stress response place to a responsive, thoughtful, cognitive, using your new brain place? And that is the single most effective and powerful performance tool you could possibly be working on at a time like this. How do you get there? How do you train yourself to do that? It's very hard to do in the moment. So don't kick yourself if you find yourself to be very reactive lately. How do you train yourself? Well, in order to train yourself to be more responsive in the moment and kind of reduce that refractory period, we have to build awareness that we're even in a stress response kind of space to begin with. And there's a couple of ways to do that. We can be proactive and upstream, and we can intentionally set times during our day to practice this awareness. We can also be reflective at the end of a day, and we can look back on and journal about, or even just sit there and think through some of the ways that we could have better responded to stress. So we could be intentional about it upstream and proactive, or we could be reflective. And there's also things that you can do in the moment when you do stop and go, oh, okay, I'm in stress response right now, and I need to get myself to a place of recovery. And there's tools that we're going to identify right now to do so. One thing we haven't talked about yet is emotional awareness and emotional curiosity. Now, this is a great skill to hone in on and train yourself on. And that's what I wanted to really focus on today, was how to train yourself to be more emotionally curious or emotionally aware. And I'm going to use this chart to kind of break that down, because I think this is a really effective tool to better manage that stress response. Because, of course, as I said, it comes with this instantaneous emotional reaction too. So I want you to think about your typical workday. All right. I know it's a new workday. Excuse me, workdays look new right now, but think about your average workday as we're talking through this. If you see this chart, I want you to look at this blue arrow right here, and I want you to think about it as the amount of energy that you have during the day. There's high energy at the top of this chart, and then there's low energy at the bottom. We move through high energy and low energy all throughout our day, right? And then we have this green arrow, and I want you to think about that as the quality of the emotion that you're bringing to the table that day. So towards your right, you can see we have positive emotions, which are more connected type emotions. And then on the left, we have more fear-based or negative emotions. You see that? So if you look at that chart with that in mind, you've got, if you look at this chart in terms of quadrants, you've got high energy, positive emotion in the top right part of your chart. You've got high energy, negative emotions in the top left. You've got low energy, positive emotions on the bottom right. And then you have low energy, negative emotions in the bottom left. Okay? So take a moment to kind of absorb that. If this was kind of the emotional spectrum of your day, we could probably all agree that we move through all of these quadrants all throughout our day. But let me break them down a little bit further. If I were to ask you, which I would if we were in person here, to tell me which of these quadrants you would ideally want to be in during your day, typical work day, or even at home, we could probably all agree that we'd want to be in the top right, right? We'd want high energy, we'd want positive emotion. This is kind of that ideal performance space. We call it the high performance zone. These emotions are things like feeling connected, purposeful, responsive, energized. You can see that, passionate, joyful, and focused, happy. If you can't be there all day long, which if you can, I'd love to know your secret, because I've never been able to get through an entire day feeling like that unless I was, on vacation or my honeymoon. The second best place to be then would be high energy and negative emotion. In fact, we could probably all agree that this is where we spend a majority of our day, moving between those two, hopefully. Because at least you have energy to get things done. And in our kind of high-paced world, where performance is measured in how much you do and how much you accomplish, we tend to get really ambitious and charge through and don't take a lot of time to take breaks. And so we tend to find ourselves in that high energy, negative emotion place. And it is a good place to be if you're trying to get stuff done. Ideally, you'd want to be top left, but if you can't, top right is probably your second most common. So that's where you would feel your stress. This is it. This is the stress zone over here. This is anxious, irritated, frustrated. Sometimes you tend to get unfocused because remember, if you're in a stress response, it does come with it cognitive impairment. You're defensive, you're fearful, and you're reactive. This tends to be a common place people find themselves at work. So then you have, let's go to the bottom right over there. We have positive emotions and we have low energy. This is your renewal zone. This is where you probably find yourselves on the weekends, on a Sunday afternoon. This is probably where you find yourself on vacation. This is where you feel happy, but also calm. So you feel peaceful, connected, joyful, rested, relaxed. This is probably where your mind tends to wander a little bit in a good way, just sort of drifts off. This is a great place to be when you need a break. Problem is, a lot of us don't think about the fact that we should probably go there during our workday, which we're going to get to. We usually tend to associate this with either after work or weekends or vacations, when actually this is a great performance tool. So we'll get there in a second. Last one is your bottom left quadrant. This is burnout zone. This is where you would go for one of two reasons. Number one, you've just had enough in that top left quadrant and you went and you charged all day long and you found yourself burned out at the end of the day. But this is also where you would probably find yourself if you were grieving, if you were sad, feeling sad or disconnected. These are all emotions you'd associate with this bottom left quadrant. I want to be really clear on one thing, and don't miss this. This is an okay place to be. You don't want to avoid this quadrant. So I don't want to sit here and tell you that this is a place you don't want to go, because it's a very normal place to find yourself, even throughout a normal workday, let alone in today's environment. You just don't want to stay there too long, right? And that's kind of speaks to what I was saying before about when we do feel stressed and we feel out of control or defeated or disengaged, we want to make sure that we're feeling those feelings, bringing awareness to them, and then moving away from them, intentionally trying to move away from them so that we don't get stuck there. So really want to make sure that I'm very clear that we're not trying to avoid bottom left. It is a place that is common to be, but also, of course, a place that, you don't really necessarily want to be all day long. But, when you're grieving and you're stressed and maybe you're charging too hard, this is the place you might find yourself. So that being said, those are the 4 quadrants of kind of this emotional awareness spectrum, or the spectrum of emotions you could feel. My guess is you've all been in one of these 4 quadrants recently. Maybe you moved through all 4 during your typical days or your days lately, all of which is completely normal. And I wanted to point out one important aspect of this chart. When you find yourselves on this left side of the chart, this is survival-based emotions, right? They're fear-based or survival-based. When you find yourself here, you can't just decide to go back up here in this high performance place, this high energy positive place. You don't just flip a switch. As much as I wish you could, as much as I wish there was a magic food or drink or workout or pill that could get you there, it's not possible, right? In order to move from a fear-based emotional place or a stress response place back up to a positive quadrant, you have to go down here to renewal. You have to go to the bottom right corner. That's why I was saying before, we tend to associate renewal zone with vacations and after work or weekends. Why are you waiting to go there during your workday? This is where you should be going, right? And so when you find yourself moving into this stress zone, hopefully not, but maybe moving into this burnout zone during your workday, move to a place of renewal. How do you do that? That's what we're going to brainstorm here in a few minutes. There are 1,000,001 ways that you can recover and renew during your workday, and all of them look different to different people. What looks like renewal to me might not be to you. To give you an example, I'm obviously stuck at home like the rest of you. I have my 9 and 11-year-old boys here, and believe it or not, laundry has become somewhat of an escape because the washer dryer is in the garage, and when the house is quite loud and I've been sitting at the computer for 2 hours, moving out to the garage to fold some laundry has actually become a little bit of a stress relief for me, or a recovery place. So just to give you one small example, it could be taking a deep breath. It could be meditation. It could be a stretch. It could be a workout. It could be a healthy snack. It could be sending a text of gratitude or kind of a how's the weather check to somebody that you love. Now, we did talk about this in our coffee talk. We had some great ideas going around, so I want to revisit that in a second here. But I just want to emphasize one thing. In a perfect world, we'd be moving between this high performance zone and this renewal zone all day. How often do you want to go into renewal if you want to get ahead of it before you get into this top left quadrant? Every 90 to 120 minutes. So every couple hours, get up from what you're doing and move into a recovery place. Even if you feel great and energized, it's a smart thing to do because we can't sit in the high performance zone all day. It's not sustainable to be that energized and positive all day long. We do need to move into a place of recovery. Like I said, that recovery could still be kind of a high energy type thing, like maybe going for a run, but it's still a renewal place. So cleaning is my renewed recovery state. I just saw that in the chat, too funny. And mine as well, actually, with the boys home. So because it looks like a disaster area in my house, as I'm sure you guys can relate. So anyway, to drive that point home, our emotional awareness directly impacts our performance, our resilience, and our connection with ourselves and others. And being curious about our emotions in the moment, it requires, like I said, upstream intentional awareness building, and it also requires reflection. So if you want to get more resilient and more emotionally aware in the moment of feeling stressed and kind of reduce that refractory period, which remember, this is an incredibly valuable performance tool for yourself, then being intentional ahead of time is a really, really effective tool. And it will, over time, strengthen your ability to recognize it in the moment. And then you can sort of pull out from your tool belt some recovery and renewal tools from your tool belt that you can use right there in the moment. So what does upstream intentional look like? What it looks like to me is setting timers in my day to remind myself to get up and move around, to remind myself to reconnect. It looks like my husband and I setting a general time when he's going to call and we're going to connect with each other during the day because he works at the hospital, so he's driving there every day. It looks like carving out time to work out and being intentional about that space and protecting it. That's what I mean by upstream. What I mean by reflection is setting a reminder for yourself at the end of a work day or any day, and having a little alarm go off that says, how'd you do today on your emotional curiosity? And sitting there and journaling about it just for a moment or two. That builds awareness and that builds strength in the moment. Renewal is absolutely critical to emotional resilience. So I really don't want you to miss that part of things. All right, so with that being said, look at that chat real quick. Cooking, running, bourbon. I love it. All right, so next one. This is where I wanted to leverage this chat function, guys. I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, I want you to brainstorm on that chat together if you feel comfortable doing so, and answer this question for me. What quadrant do you typically find yourself in at work and then at home? So in that chat function, you'd say something like work, top left, and then home, bottom left, or something like that. I would love for you guys to use that chat function for a moment and kind of connect with each other and with me, and I'll be keeping an eye on it. So where do you find yourself typically at work and at home? Yes, I can put the quadrants back up. High and high. So high positive or high negative? Work top right, home lower right. Great. Great. This is awesome. So top right, bottom right. Wynn says work and home, both high performance, not so much downtime. Awesome. You know, it is funny when we met in February, you guys were very positive, a lot of high positive energy, which is super, super awesome. It sounds like one of the primary reasons for that, and this is total conjecture, but it sounds like it's because you guys have such a great community, and you know, probably your personality lends itself to the field, but also I think you guys have such a great community with this MPI. Actually, someone just said that you surround yourself with like people. Great. Home, bottom right, work, top right, sometimes left. Awesome. This is great. And it's okay not to share, by the way. Sometimes if you feel like you are in that bottom left corner, you don't really want to admit it. And if you are feeling that way, again, totally normal place to be right now, especially. So make sure that you are spending some time in renewal. These are really good. I'm just reading through them one more time. Let's see. A lot of top rights. And a lot of people said that home seems to be your bottom right. I love that. Home is definitely a place for a lot of us for renewal. I just want to emphasize one thing. I know right now that home and work are the same thing, but make sure that your work day is integrating some of these concepts. Hey, Christine, how are you, girl? Yeah, totally overwhelmed. Absolutely. And let's get to some of the renewal strategies, because I do feel like this is a really common place to be. And we certainly need a particular type of renewal, I think, with some of this overwhelm that we're feeling with this COVID crisis and what it's doing to the industry. So I do want to make sure we get to some of those strategies. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to move you to the next question. And this is where I want to spend some time right now. What is one way that you're renewing when you feel like you are in this survival state, that left side of the quadrant, either high negative or low negative? What are some of the things that you do? And I would love for you to share so that your friends and colleagues can kind of shamelessly share as well. So somebody said Mead Gardens. Awesome. Box breathing. I love it. Yoga, great. Arts and crafts, perfect. Going for a walk. These are great. Perfect. A lot of physical stuff. Swim, cook, exercise. Can't underestimate the power of exercise right now. You've got your dopamine, you've got your serotonin, you've got your endorphins. All of those things are wonderful cortisol fighters. So make sure you're getting your exercise for sure. I love it. Home projects, cooking, move my body in some way. Hopefully some of you, I saw one box breathe. Hopefully some of you are looking for ways to integrate breathing. I see some yoga too, so you're probably doing the same, but breathing techniques into the routine. One thing that I did say in February, I want to reiterate right now, is that there's incredible power in your breath, believe it or not, and the power of intentional breathing and focused breathing, also known as meditation. Taking a really deep breath and emphasizing that exhale. What it actually does is trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. Remember that kind of other side of the stress response that calms the heart rate. And so even right now, if you take a really deep breath and you exhale and focus on that exhale, you will probably feel calmer and more focused. So definitely integrate that. Let me see this. I like to keep whiteboards and write on them. I love it. Very cool. Oh, got it. Physical. If you don't know what box breathing is, by the way, box breathing is inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4 counts, exhaling for 4 counts, and then holding for 4 counts. And if you did that 5-10 times, it's a really, really great way to calm yourself when you find yourself either in high negative or low negative. Oh, I love it. Gotta love Apple Watch. These are great. These are really wonderful. One other one that I haven't seen yet on the chat that I want to call out is there is incredible power in connection with people. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself for our May 5th webinar, but when you look at the science of stress, the science of mental health and well-being, connection is actually in the findings, this is the science talking, not me. Connection with others is the single most important and most valuable tool that you can use to combat mental health crises. So what does that look like? Spending time with loved ones, these virtual, I don't know if you guys have been doing virtual happy hours on Zoom, but I certainly have been, and that is really helpful to connect with my friends and family. We had dinner with my mom yesterday for her birthday. I mean, do you think these are really powerful tools? I want to put one into practice right now because I've been kind of keeping this one in my back pocket. I want you all to do me a favor, and I want you to pull out your smartphone. I'm pretty sure you probably have it within reach right now, and maybe you're on it right now. And I want you to spend a moment, and I want you to text somebody that you care about, and I want you to express gratitude to them. Just a specific, be specific about it. Not just, hey, I'm thankful for you, but your own Zoom happy hour. So I want you to go ahead and take out that phone and send a gratitude text to somebody. Be real specific. You know, I'm grateful for you because. Good one, Dave. So go ahead and send that out. And then what I want you to do on that chat function is I want you to tell me afterward. I know this is going to take a minute. It's going to be a little bit of silence, but I want you to tell me how it felt afterward after you sent that text. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to send it to my husband because it's his birthday today. Don't forget to be specific. Thank you. So send that gratitude text out, or if that person's in the other room, just run over there and yell at them how much you're grateful for them and why. And there's a reason I'm asking you to do this right now in the moment. This is an incredible connection tool. Oh, I love it. Please thank her or him for me. Oh. So Nicole says, I had a huge grin sending it to one of my best friends, and her replies, oh, you're going to make me cry. Obviously, gratitude and connection, they're a two-way street. Not only are you improving someone else's sense of well-being and moving them right up into that top right quadrant, but you're moving yourself there too. I love it. Gratitude in the science, guys, which is super interesting. Gratitude has been shown to improve long-term health. Longevity of life is connected and related in the research to your improved immune function. It is incredibly valuable, and so is, you know, just generally connection with others. I can't wait to dive into the stress personality research and science that we're going to get into on May 5th, but this is one big part of it. Physical well-being, make sure that you're getting your workouts in. Make sure, even if you can't get a workout in, just simply move your body in any way you can. Deep stretches, yoga. Oh, I love it. Teeter and family. Wonderful. Taking care of your nutrition. I know that we covered sleep. I know you know that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night is really valuable. So I'm trying to go through all these dimensions, the physical dimension being very important. One thing that you want to watch right now, obviously, is your sugar intake, your processed sugars particularly. They're not exactly conducive to helping with your stress. They're actually going to exacerbate it. So making sure that you're making good decisions on your nutrition. Like I said, making sure, I love it. Making sure that you are taking care of your mental well-being by these deep breaths and these connections and these gratitudes. Another one that you can do right now, if you do find yourself thinking, kind of negatively, is to pick a phrase or some sort of affirmation, which we're going to talk about next time, that just kind of picks you up, like a positive affirmation, like I'm okay. Yeah. And then one that we haven't really covered, I haven't seen it on the chat, is your spiritual well-being. Now, I'm not really referring necessarily to religion here. I'm just referring to your sense of meaning and purpose. This is one of those times when we probably need to step back and maintain healthy perspective. There is, a greater story being told than what we're living through right now, and things will bounce back and they'll get back to normal. So thinking about and maybe journaling about your why you're here, what you want to do with your life, maybe what you think your mission is. Those are really cool things to be doing right now, and they help you maintain healthy perspective on what's going on. And again, something that you're in control of is your sense of purpose and meaning. So make sure that you are leveraging that as much as you can. One really great tool that you could use is trying to write yourself a mission statement or a purpose statement. And essentially what that is just a statement of who you are and why you are and what you want to accomplish. And if you keep that in a place that is easily seen in your house or in your car, it's a good reminder when you do feel stressed to kind of reconnect and ground with a greater perspective. Oh, I love it. Gratitude apps and Insight. I love Insight Timer. There's a lot of different technologies and tools you can use too. I know Calm has some good small features in it. I know it's a meditation app, but it also has good small features in it. So I want to open it up. Let's see, where are we at? I wanted to open it up. I know we're kind of a little bit early on closing out, but I wanted to open it up for some questions and leave some space for you. You guys had some really, really good suggestions for each other on renewal. And just to reiterate, I know I keep saying this, but I want to drive the point home. It is incredibly normal to feel all the feels right now and all of these different emotions. Your stress response is normal and biological, and you're not going to get rid of it. And you don't want to. However, you can control your awareness of it and how it's making you feel. Before I open it up for questions, one thing I do want to let you know is that next week when we do this, there's some really, really compelling, interesting science that we have not covered yet on stress personalities and all of us having kind of different ways that stress shows up. Some of this conversation is going to overlap, but it's going to be totally new stuff, and it's a lot of fun, and I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. It's a project in science that I've been working on for the past year and a half with a couple of different clients. So I want to share that with you. And it's really, really radical new stuff. It's going to change the way that we look at stress and mental health. And I can't really go into any more detail without giving it away. So hope you're going to be there next week and figure out what your stress personality is. All right, so can we open it up to questions real quick? You can either use that Q&A or you can use that chat function if you feel more comfortable there, and then I'd be happy to answer them. And again, this can be about stress, but it can also be about any other kind of well-being related, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and all of that. Here's one. Yeah, so I have a question that says, and I'll get to the other ones. I've been doing pretty good during the day, but when my head hits the pillow, something else happens, a new anxiety that I usually don't face. Any tips for bedtime? Yes, a couple of different things. Number one, if you've never kept a worry journal or done something called a mind dump before bed, I would highly recommend it. And pair it with some deep breathing. It's like wine and cheese, they go together really well. A mind dump or worry journal. A worry journal can be kept whenever you want it. You pull out and you write your worries down when they come into your head. It's the same thing as a mind dump at the end of the day. Get out a journal and just write down all of those things that are bringing you anxiety. Whatever the worry is, no matter how silly you think it might be, write it down and then do some deep breathing. And that over time has been shown to decrease that feeling of anxiety before bed. But another thing I might look at is just consider your caffeine consumption during the day. Make sure you're not having any after 2 p.m. And then make sure you have a really good, healthy sleep routine and ritual before bed that kind of signals your brain that it's time for bed. So as opposed to maybe being on your phone and scrolling or looking at the TV and then going, oh, I should go to bed, and then going and hitting the sack, one thing you could do is at a certain time, let's say your bedtime is 10, at 9:30, turn all the lights out, make it cool in the house, get rid of all of your screens, and start this ritual of getting ready for bed. That might not work the first couple of nights, but over time, it's going to start to train your brain to calm down and stop running 1,000 miles an hour. So hopefully that helps. That mind dump, it definitely helps me. Next one. Oh, there we go. Find myself really restless before bed. I love it. Harnessing stress to make it energy. So I hopefully, Nicole, I answered yours, but this next one that says harnessing stress to make it energy from Rob, that's more, to me, I'm reading that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm reading that more of a reframing or shifting perspective. That's the way that I would interpret that question, and I certainly think it's possible. Stress is not a bad thing. Not even remotely a bad thing. You can definitely leverage stress. And I worked with a company called Human Performance Institute for a while, and they have a very strong belief that there's a difference between chronic stress, everyday stress, and then training stress, right? And training stress is a completely different thing. That's being intentional about harnessing this biological reaction and using it for increasing your resilience and your capacity to perform at a higher level. For example, I can guarantee, I would put money on it, that every single person on this webinar is an ambitious high performer. Otherwise, you wouldn't be part of this group, and you probably wouldn't have been pressing that high positive left quadrant the whole time, because you guys want to do more, and you want to constantly be advancing and improving yourself. That being said, training stress is for you, right? You probably put yourself in challenging situations in order to grow. So it is an interesting question, Rob, to ask yourself, how could we actually take this opportunity and look at it as one giant training opportunity to increase our resilience? Because I can guarantee you that we're all going to be more resilient and have greater perspective on the other side of this thing. So I love that idea, Rob. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really great that you brought it up, because it's an important tool. Here's another one. Yes. So Casey, you can't control where other people are, but you can certainly, number one, control your response to them and make sure you're practicing self-care, because energy is definitely contagious. There's some really interesting science that energy is contagious. And when somebody's negative energy walks into a room, it can certainly bring you to the other side of that chart. That being said, it works the other way around. So infusing positive energy into your environment and into those people and pouring into them, even though your instinct might be to get away from them or fight them or argue with them. No, we want to be like Jerry. Even though you want to probably remove yourself from that situation, pouring into them and trying to get them to a place of renewal is really helpful. So just to give you a random example, and using kids as an example, if I do find myself or find my boys right now in a, either high negative or low negative place, usually it's high negative if they're fighting with each other or working on school and something's challenging, I'll actually stop everybody and we'll take 10 deep breaths. And so I'm seeing them in a quadrant that I'm not in. And so I'm trying to bring them into a place of renewal instead of just being like, what's wrong with you? Just be happy, or what's wrong with you? Just be thankful. Probably they need to be moved to that place of renewal. So if there's a way for you to get them there, great. But also if you can't, it really is out of your control, then maybe it's time to, if you can, kind of remove yourself from that situation and make sure you're taking care of number one. I don't know if that helps. It's probably going to be up to you to discern. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, it is so hard, isn't it? I'm a hugger. Immune boosting food recommendations. Yes and no. Yes, avoid sugar. That would be my number one. Avoid sugar and work on this stress. I think those are going to be your number one, your number two and number one. Work on your stress and avoid processed foods and sugars. And then, in terms of immune boosting foods, I would say opt for lots of vegetables right now. Drink plenty of water. The more vegetables, the better. And just eat foods that are worthy of you at a time like this. Make sure that you're watching, not kind of eating a lot of boxed foods and a lot of sodas and juices, if possible. And I'll touch for just one quick second on alcohol. Not a bad thing, but it's definitely something that we can overuse as a tool for renewal. And there's a fine line there between having a glass of wine on a Zoom chat and then, needing a glass of wine at the end of the day to renew. So just watch that, because it actually disrupts your sleep cycle and it can have a negative impact on your immune system downstream. So, alcohol and sugar, probably things you want to watch out for. And yes, Mark said hydrate. Absolutely. Definitely keep drinking. Make sure you're drinking lots of water. Oh, great, Christine. Thank you. So if there's nothing else, thank you for spending this time with me. I hope it was useful. And, I'm rooting for you all and for our industries, both of ours. I know that we're gonna bounce back for sure. And thank you. And I hope that I see you next week.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was great. I feel inspired. I think I'm going to go for a jog or do something active. So yeah, just a reminder, Lauren will be speaking with us next week at 10 a.m. You can register at mpiorlando.org. You can also find information there about our other upcoming series with Florida Connects Education. And again, thank you to Applied Meetings and Hospitality Solutions for providing the technology today to host this webinar. We couldn't do it without you. And I hope everyone has a great week and is inspired by this as much as I was. So we'll see you guys next time.
Nicole, thank you, everybody.
Bye.